Imagine this. Wall Street is in chaos, tech giants are scrambling, and entrepreneurs everywhere are losing sleep. Amid all this noise, there are a few rare individuals who move through the storm like unshakable mountains. They are calm, decisive, and untouchable by fear or panic. Their secret is not luck nor raw genius. It is a mental framework forged over 2,000 years ago, a system that powered warriors, emperors, and now some of the sharpest minds in Silicon Valley. Tim Ferriss, a modern-day advocate of this philosophy, puts it plainly: Stoicism is the ultimate operating system for thriving in high-stress environments. It's about training yourself to separate what you can control from what you cannot. This is the code behind the clarity of Marcus Aurelius in the middle of war, behind the discipline of Epictetus despite a life in chains, and behind billion-dollar founders who treat crises not as disasters, but as training grounds. Welcome to the Stoic Lighthouse, where ancient wisdom meets the modern battlefield of business and life. Here, our mission is simple: to cut through the fog and help you build an unshakable mind. If that's what you're searching for, hit that like button and subscribe now so you never miss the next guide. Today, we are going to decode the Stoic Billionaire's playbook. We'll uncover how Seneca and his modern heirs turn fear into focus, master success without becoming slaves to it, transform crises into catalysts for growth, and ultimately find a purpose that money can never buy. Seneca once reminded us, "He who is prepared for every misfortune deprives misfortune of its power." This is not theory. This is the mental framework that built empires, survived exiles, and today drives those who thrive under pressure. And by the end of this video, you'll have the tools to do the same. Number 1. The shield against fear. How Stoics conquer risk and uncertainty. Fear is not loud. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It creeps into your thoughts at night, asking questions that paralyze you. What if I fail? What if I lose everything? What if I'm not enough? For most people, fear becomes a prison, but a Stoic doesn't run from fear. They face it head-on. Their secret weapon is premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evils. Instead of daydreaming about success, they visualize failure in vivid detail. They see the business collapsing, the investment evaporating, the humiliation of starting over. And then, paradoxically, they feel relief, because once you confront the worst-case scenario, it loses its power. As Seneca taught, he who has anticipated the coming of troubles takes away their power when they arrive. By rehearsing adversity in the mind, fear turns into preparation. This is why modern thinkers like Tim Ferriss reinvented this practice and call it fear setting. He openly credits it for the boldest decisions of his career. Ferriss reminds us, define your fears, not just your goals. Conquering fear is the beginning of real freedom. This is not toxic optimism. This is psychological armor. Ancient Stoics treated fear like a storm you can't stop but can prepare for. Marcus Aurelius himself, leading an empire plagued by war and disease, used this exact method to remain unshakable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Even Heraclitus, long before Stoicism, warned us, nothing is permanent except change. The Stoic embraces this truth. They use fear not as a barrier, but as a compass. They ask, if I survive this worst-case scenario, what becomes possible? That shift transforms anxiety into strategy. Fear no longer controls them, it trains them. And in our modern age, this mindset is echoed by Naval Ravikant, who built his fortune not by avoiding risk but by mastering it. Naval puts it bluntly, play long-term games with long-term people. Fear loses its grip when you stop playing short-term. The result? A leader who walks into the unknown with calculated calm. A person who no longer waits for certainty because they've already rehearsed the chaos and learned to move through it. This is the Stoic shield, not the absence of fear, but the transformation of fear into strength. Number 2, the fortress against success, mastering wealth, ego, and power. Failure is obvious, it hurts, it humbles, but success is far more dangerous because it whispers. It inflates the ego, blinds us with comfort, and chains us to what we fear losing. Most people imagine success as the finish line. The Stoic sees it as a new battlefield, one that requires an even stronger mind. The Stoics called wealth, status, and even life itself indifference, not because they didn't matter, but because they lacked moral value. Seneca, one of the wealthiest men in Rome, lived in luxury, but refused to let it define him. He warned, "True happiness is to enjoy the present without anxious dependence upon the future." To keep his soul untouchable, Seneca practiced voluntary discomfort. He wore simple clothes, slept on hard ground, and reminded himself that losing everything would not break him. Why? Because comfort breeds weakness. Discipline preserves freedom. This same principle is mirrored in our world today. Naval Ravikant, a modern billionaire philosopher, speaks against the trap of status. Seek wealth, not money or status. Wealth is freedom. Status is playing a zero-sum game that only feeds the ego. Naval's warning echoes the Stoic wisdom. Use wealth as a tool, never as an identity. The Stoic billionaire can enjoy fortune without becoming its prisoner. Power becomes service, money becomes leverage for virtue, and ego is the enemy. A lesson Ryan Holiday, one of today's leading Stoic voices, emphasizes relentlessly. Ryan Holiday reminds us, ego is the enemy. It's the disease that turns ambition into arrogance and talent into entitlement. This is why the Stoic leader treats success like fire. Controlled, it provides warmth. Unchecked, it burns everything down. The discipline to master wealth, ego, and power comes from a single mental shift, understanding that none of it can touch the fortress within. That fortress is built from wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. In ancient Rome, Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth, yet wrote to himself daily, "Receive wealth or prosperity without arrogance, and be ready to let it go." He didn't write that for history books. He wrote it as a reminder, because even an emperor needed armor against the seduction of success, and so does every entrepreneur, every leader, and every person who dreams of greatness. The fortress is not your bank account. The fortress is your mind. Number 3, the alchemy of crisis, turning obstacles into fuel for growth. No matter how disciplined, wealthy, or prepared you are, the storm will come. Markets crash, competitors strike, life throws punches you never see coming. For most people, a crisis feels like the end. For the Stoic, it is the beginning, because where others see disaster, the Stoic sees raw material for greatness. Ryan Holiday, one of the most influential modern interpreters of Stoicism, condensed this timeless mindset into one powerful phrase: the obstacle is the way. This isn't poetic fluff. It's the brutal truth that shaped the lives of Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus, and countless leaders who came after them. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled through plagues, betrayals, and wars, transformed every setback into training for his character. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." When the world collapses, the Stoic doesn't curse fate. They adapt. They treat every crisis as a forge, a place where weakness burns away and strength is tempered. This is amor fati, the radical love of fate. It is not mere acceptance of what happens, it is embracing it as if you chose it. Modern psychology echoes this ancient wisdom. Kevin Vost, blending Stoicism with neuroscience, explains, "Resilience isn't the absence of adversity. It's the ability to transform adversity into growth. This is why a Stoic billionaire doesn't panic when the market crashes. He asks, "What can this teach me? What advantage hides inside this chaos?" Like Zeno, who lost everything in a shipwreck and declared it the best thing that ever happened to him, they know that crisis doesn't end the story. It rewrites it. Zeno himself once said, "Now that I have been shipwrecked, I am on a good voyage." This is the essence of Stoic alchemy. Pain becomes fuel, loss becomes clarity, and obstacles become the path itself. The Stoic doesn't merely survive the fire, he becomes the fire. Number 4, the inner compass. Stoic decision-making in high-stakes moments. Every business, every life is built on decisions. Some are small, others change everything. But in a world filled with uncertainty, data overload, and constant pressure, most people freeze. They wait for perfect clarity, which never comes. The Stoic, however, doesn't wait. They decide, not recklessly, but with a framework as old as philosophy itself. This framework is forged from the 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. For the Stoic entrepreneur, these aren't abstract ideals, they are a compass. First, wisdom. It is seeing reality as it is, stripped of fear and wishful thinking. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, taught that clear perception is the foundation of freedom. No illusions, no convenient lies. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If anyone can refute me, show me I am mistaken, I will gladly change, for it is the truth I seek, and no one was ever harmed by the truth." Second, justice. The Stoic leader asks, is this decision right for my team, my partners, my community? Cicero, influenced by Stoic thought, called justice the queen of all virtues because without it, society collapses. Modern leaders like Ray Dalio follow this same principle, building companies rooted in radical transparency and fairness. Ray Dalio reminds us, without principles, we'd be forced to react to life circumstances without a consistent approach. Third, courage. The courage to act despite fear, to make the difficult call, whether that's firing a toxic partner, admitting a mistake, or taking a calculated risk no one else dares to touch. Epictetus hammered this lesson into his students. First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Finally, temperance. The discipline to control impulses, resist overconfidence, and avoid reckless growth. As Naval Ravikant advises modern entrepreneurs, play long-term games, avoid short-term ego traps. When you filter every decision through this compass, fear loses its grip. You stop asking, what if I'm wrong? And start asking, is this virtuous? Because for the Stoic, a decision made with virtue is never truly a loss. With this compass, the Stoic entrepreneur can navigate even the darkest storms with a steady hand. Because while markets shift and empires fall, virtue never wavers. Number 5, the people game. How Stoics build teams, partners, and resilience. You can have the best strategy in the world, the smartest technology, and the boldest vision. But if you don't know how to lead people, you will fail. Business is not just numbers, it's human beings, and nothing tests a leader's philosophy more than managing relationships with teams, partners, competitors, and even enemies. This is where the Stoic mindset becomes a superpower. The Stoics believed in a concept called oikiosis, the natural sense of connection that begins with the self and expands outward to family, community, and eventually to all of humanity. For a Stoic leader, this isn't just moral philosophy. It's a practical way to build teams and partnerships that endure. Marcus Aurelius, who commanded one of the most powerful empires in history, understood this deeply. He wrote, "What is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bee." This is leadership at its core. The health of the collective determines the health of the individual. Modern leaders like Jocko Willink echo this principle in their own language of discipline and responsibility. Jocko, a retired Navy SEAL and leadership strategist, teaches there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. A Stoic leader never hides behind titles. They lead from the front, absorbing pressure so their teams can think clearly. They don't ask others to do what they would not do themselves. Like Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations, they treat leadership as service, not privilege. When it comes to competitors, the Stoic approach is equally unconventional. Most people see rivals as enemies. Stoics see them as sparring partners, necessary forces that sharpen their skill. Kobe Bryant, though not a Stoic philosopher, embodied this mindset in his relentless respect for competition. He studied opponents obsessively, not with hatred, but with admiration, turning every rivalry into fuel for mastery. Then there are the difficult people, toxic partners, aggressive clients, or manipulative competitors. Epictetus prepared his students for exactly this. He taught them, remember that you are an actor in a play which the playwright has chosen. Your task is only to play the role well, not to choose it. You cannot control how others act. You can only control your response. The Stoic leader focuses on character, not chaos. They refuse to be dragged into petty conflicts. Their strength is in restraint because they know that true influence comes from example, not argument. In the boardroom, this translates into calm under pressure. In negotiations, it means discipline instead of desperation. In moments of betrayal, it means acting with clarity instead of vengeance. This isn't weakness, it is power. William Birvine, a modern Stoic writer, frames it perfectly. Stoicism gives you a kind of social invincibility. When you no longer react to every slight or insult, you become impossible to manipulate. The Stoic entrepreneur uses this advantage to create resilient organizations. They set the tone, they build trust, they turn conflicts into lessons and failures into stepping stones. And because they play the long game, they avoid the toxic politics that destroy most teams from the inside out. Ultimately, the Stoic leader doesn't just build a company, they build a culture, one where people want to stay, one where loyalty runs deep, one where even in crisis, the team moves as a single unit. And when that happens, the competition doesn't stand a chance, because they're not just fighting an individual. They're facing a disciplined phalanx, united by virtue and guided by an unshakable philosophy. Number 6, beyond money, the true exit of a Stoic billionaire. In the world of business, everyone talks about the exit, the IPO, the billion-dollar acquisition, the moment of ultimate validation. But if you've been paying attention, you already know what most founders discover too late. Money doesn't end the game. Many who win still feel trapped, because they built empires on the outside but never conquered themselves on the inside. For a Stoic, the real exit isn't financial, it's philosophical. It's the freedom that comes from no longer needing more to feel complete. Seneca, who had access to unthinkable wealth and influence, warned against the illusion of chasing endlessly. It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor. This is why Stoics trained themselves not just for success, but for independence from success. They learned to enjoy prosperity without becoming slaves to it. They could sleep on the floor one day and sit in the halls of power the next, unchanged. This is the mental wealth modern billionaires cannot buy. Naval Ravikant captures this perfectly for our age. A calm mind, a fit body, and a house full of love. These things cannot be bought. They must be earned. This is what the Stoic billionaire seeks, not the biggest exit, but the quietest mind. They measure their net worth not in dollars, but in self-mastery. This is why Zeno's shipwreck wasn't his end. It was his beginning. Stripped of everything, he built something far greater, a philosophy that still guides the strongest minds on earth. Zeno once said, "I made a prosperous voyage when I suffered shipwreck." This isn't just ancient poetry, it's the ultimate business lesson. Money is a tool, status is a shadow, freedom is the only true wealth. William Birvine adds a modern reminder. To live like a Stoic is to stop postponing your happiness. You stop saying, "I'll be content when," and start living in a way where nothing external can take it from you. When you understand this, the game changes. You no longer obsess over exits because you've already exited the worst trap of all, the belief that your value depends on anything outside yourself. This is why the Stoic billionaire doesn't just build companies. They build character. They play the infinite game, the one you win by needing less, by mastering your mind, and by becoming untouchable to the chaos of fortune. We've just uncovered the mental blueprint that forged warriors, emperors, and the most resilient entrepreneurs of our time. We've seen how fear can be transformed into focus, how wealth can be mastered without becoming its prisoner, how crises become fuel for growth, how virtue becomes the ultimate compass for decisions, how leadership rooted in discipline unites teams, and how the real exit is not financial but philosophical. This is why the Stoic doesn't play a finite game. A finite game ends when the scoreboard does. The Stoic plays the infinite game, where the only opponent worth defeating is yesterday's version of yourself. Every fear faced, every crisis endured, every act of discipline sharpens the mind and strengthens the soul. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this daily. Look well into yourself. There is a source of strength which will always spring up if you will always look. This strength is what we train here at the Stoic Lighthouse. And if you're ready to live by it, hit that like button, subscribe, and join a community of people who refuse to be ruled by chaos. Share this video with someone who needs this light, because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs clarity. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these Stoic strategies will you apply in your own life starting today? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your reflection may be exactly what someone else needs to read. And don't go anywhere, because in our next video, we'll uncover why the Stoics often said no without explaining themselves, and why you should too. The answer might completely rewrite the way you make decisions. Ralph Waldo Emerson once wrote, "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us." That is where the infinite game is played. See you in the next video.